Welcome, everybody. It's the Ricochet Podcast number 525. I'm in Minneapolis. My name is James Lileks. The snow is not on the ground. We have been denied our white Christmas thus far. People are surly. Rob Long is in Maryland, where I believe there is snow on the ground. And Peter Robinson in California spoke of snow recently. But Peter, unfortunately, for those of you who are watching live on the Zoom, you're going to get a treat because Peter's going to attempt to download Slack and install it while we talk, which means he'll be throwing a rope over one of those rafters in the back of his shot there.
Impossible.
Yeah. Stepping up on a stool and
not a good Christmas move.
I have already decided not to proceed. Because the very first window gives me a choice of 3 different kinds of Slack to download. How do I know what kind of Slack is?
Yeah, this is something you got to call a kid.
I'm in California. The scene behind me is in Hanover, New Hampshire, where they had a foot of snow last night, to the delight of my daughter who's studying there. Home for the holidays.
We could do Zoom. We could do Teams. We could do any of these things. Recently at the office, I was invited to go to a virtual potluck, which we always used to have at the office in person. Everybody would mill around, bring food. We'd talk. It was great. The idea of doing it on a screen with everybody in their little postage stamp window,
oh my God,
shoving food in their face, and then passing the conch shell so that one person talks at a time is the antithesis of a holiday party. And I say it's spinach and to hell with it.
So the problem with all these is the ending, how they end, because you don't really know.
Yes.
Like, is this how long is this gonna go? This weird. I went to a wedding reception Zoom recently, and the bride and groom really had worked it out. They said 45 minutes, and we're gonna create rooms, and we're gonna assign a host to each table, and then you can kind of table hop over 4 tables, and it was all done. It was great. And then at 45 minutes, it's over. Goodbye. And knowing that somebody had planned the end allows you to enjoy the during, I think. Anyway, that's my thought.
At the office, you can always just drift away, of course, but you can't do that in Zoom. You blink out. What we need is a new program, actually, for this brave new world that establishes the parameters of how to behave on these calls. We need a doctorate-level program, and I'm going to get that doctorate, and I'm going to insist that everybody refer to me as such with the credentials that I deserve. Look, we got all these great stories about COVID and the bill and the hack and the Biden and the rest of it, but I still can't get over the deliciousness of this last week's flap over Dr. Jill Biden, because it really does say so much about what they dearly, dearly believe. And by they, I mean the overprivileged credentialed class that believes getting a piece of paper from a particular institution somehow lofts you above the rest of the people and gives you, the authority to look down and tell them what to do. Now, Peter, you're in, of course, an academic institution. Did you have a lot of doctors around there that insist on me calling that because they got a doctor?
No, none of my no. I mean, where everybody's a doctor around here. So, in the first place, I'm seeing nobody because the university is still closed. It's closed. It's tight down for COVID, and then it's deserted for the holidays. So I haven't seen any colleagues, but. No, you don't. When 80% of the population holds a doctorate of some kind, you don't go around saying, "Oh, hello, doctor," and "Hello to you, doctor." No. By the way, Joe Epstein is urbane, witty, sophisticated. This is like turning howitzer on a butterfly.
But
making a witty, trenchant comment that didn't deserve. Go ahead, Rob.
I should say you're right, but you're right. Although, I mean, I guess I'm not crazy about the politicization, the partisanation of this. Partisanation, whatever the polemics.
What you mean? It ain't a word. But
I'm not. Because I remember people say Dr. Kissinger, Dr. Henry. Really, Dr. Henry Kissinger? Can he? I have a tickle in my throat, Dr. Kissinger. Can you help me? I mean, the credentialism, which I thought was interesting, because James used that word. I think it's what surprised me about it was how baldly people defended Dr. Jill Biden with this kind of outrage. Like, I insist you use my credentials. Mm-hmm. Like, God, we haven't gotten past this yet. This doctor, I don't even like it when former office holders, especially former appointees, get to be. When Sean Hannity has Newt Gingrich on, and he says and has his most syrupy voice, Mr. Speaker. He's not Mr. Speaker anymore. He was Mr. Speaker when he was Speaker. We're going to live in America. This is America.
Well,
the highest rank you could attain is citizen. True. He's not Speaker Gingrich anymore. He's Mr. Gingrich. By the way, that's not a come down. I'm not Speaker Long either. So I would like for us all to like dispense with it. There are people sauntering, and I would even go far to say there are people swanning around certain nonprofit think tank institutions I could name who still refer to themselves as secretary because they were once cabinet officers. That is absolutely ridiculous. Secretary, ambassador, doctor, give me a break.
Well, the interesting thing about this is to insist on credentialism as a mark of your authority and your worth as a person is an odd thing to do in 2020 when nearly every single institution in which we place some sort of faith has revealed itself to be a termite-ridden structure that collapsed at the first wind. I mean, nobody really got out of 2020 with their reputations intact. And is to insist somehow that the elite credentialed class deserves our respect automatically because of what they went through to get that piece of paper is preposterous. I would love to have faith and trust in the elites in a certain sense. I mean, in one way, I would love for the world to be saved by a college professor and a dedicated bureaucrat because it would help to restore sort of the narrative that there are actually smart people in college and there are competent, dedicated people in government. But as it stands now, what I fear is you have this populist rise that equates the sort of elitism of these institutions with their devotion to credentials, that equates that with an anti-intellectualism. In other words,
have we learned nothing from Trump? This is the whole Trump message. This idea.
I actually have learned nothing from Trump.
Everybody who had Rob bringing in Trump at this point early on when we were trying to avoid
I mean, like there. It's amazing how quickly these things switch. There was this very, very powerful argument on the left for a long time against this kind of credentialism, that it was, I don't know what the word would be. It was discriminatory, whatever, right? All those things. And now everybody wants their goodies and nobody wants to. I mean, I think we should all give up our goodies. If this is a goodie, why don't just give this part up too? I mean, I've always hated the doctor thing. If you're a current professor, you could be a professor. If you can fix me, if something's broken or I'm sick, you could be a doctor. But everybody else has just got to be Mr. and Mrs. or I don't know. I saw the New York Times did a profile of an actor last week who prefers he likes him pronouns, but the Mr. it's MX.
MX, yes.
So mix. I kept reading it as mix this, mix that. But MX now.
I think mix.
It's unpronounceable.
When I see MX, which it is unpronounceable. I think of the little character in the Superman comics that you couldn't get rid of until you made him say his name backwards.
I think of the missile that's the end of the Cold
exactly.
War,
right? Oh, right.
Yes. Well, the
MX.
program.
I saw you taking some coffee there, Peter. So I thought I better jump in.
Yeah, thank you. Train-based missile. That's what I think.
Exactly.
Which was quite. Do you remember that? That was a remarkable moment because it's just the people who did not understand the advantages of a train-based missile just roaming around in the Southwest somewhere were driven mad by that concept. This was the ultimate.
Can I just? This is Christmassy time, and there's a certain nostalgia in the air. We're all remembering
nostalgia for nuclear weapons.
I'm nostalgia for the Peacemaker. I think it was called.
Mm-hmm. How do you guys handle the problem, which for sure, I don't want to go into old man talk. We're, sort of second half of middle age. And the problem is as follows. Between 1/2 and 1/3 of the people with whom you deal every day, and when Stanford is open, in my case, it's 80% of the people I deal with every day because there's students around, just don't remember stuff that is in my mind absolutely basic. And I'm talking, of course, about politics, the MX missile, Ronald, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But also my father was older when I was born, but my father served in the Second World War. I remember that. My mother grew up on a farm. And when I was a little kid, we still visited, my grandparents still ran the farm. And so I'm used to the smell of cow, in touch with rural America, which dominated life in the country for the first century, 180 years of its existence. And kids it's gone. It's just not there. For them, it's sepia toned. Ronald Reagan is right up there with Grover Cleveland and James Buchanan. It bugs me because I think they ought to know certain things they ought to know. And then other stuff just trips me up because so much of what I take for granted is just, by the way, the people I'm bitching about are my own children, of course.
Okay.
Right,
I was wondering
right.
what the age groups
Yeah.
are here.
Yeah.
No, I think it happens a lot when you're talking, for me, in my experience, less about history and the big sweep of things than about how it was being received at the time.
Right.
And about certain political skirmishes and scandals. Like that to me is the sort of collective cultural memory that's gone. So it isn't so much the specifics of the MX missile, but the hysterical reaction to it.
Right.
And the hysterical reaction to the fact that the belief in 1983, 1984, but from about 1981 and about 1985, that we were all going to die in a nuclear holocaust.
Or
that was really going to happen.
Yeah.
And then not only did it not happen, when the opposite happened, it was suddenly disappeared. We just absolutely memory hold. There's no reason why anyone young would understand, would know this, because as a piece of cultural history, it has been utterly erased.
Just erased.
Unlike the blacklist, unlike McCarthyism, unlike the hippie movement in the late 60s, unlike any of that stuff. That's all taught as like, under the rubric of cultural history. But the doomsday cult status of we're all gonna die, the fate of the earth, Jonathan Shell's multi-platinum selling album, we're all gonna die. And and the idea that like that's worth studying,
that's true.
And the mania is worth studying is something that they didn't learn it. Why would they learn it? We keep the tablets, Peter.
There was a thing. We keep the tablets. There was a thing, I guess it was on Netflix, anyways, Bruce Springsteen. And my kids were watching this and really grooving to Bruce Springsteen, whom they view as a historic figure, of course, and I said, well, I still have I do love his music, but during the nuclear freeze movement, Bruce Springsteen was the headline performer at a demonstration in Central Park that to that point in American history was the largest outdoor gathering ever. And it still sort of bothers me. He was on the wrong, and my kids look at me as if to say, what are you talking about? It's just gone. It's just gone. Right. Oh, well. Oh, Rob. So I'm sorry, James. In a moment, same question to you. You live in Greenwich Village. Unless I'm wrong, unless I'm very wrong, here's what happens in your life. Some young person will come up who wants to be in show business, will come up to you and say, Dr. Long, no, I'm not and
I insist.
Say, tell me, how can I be a television writer like you were? And you have to say, oh, son, the world of Cheers is just gone.
Yeah, I like that. I like the look on their face when I do it too. I tell them what I did, and then I say, of course, you can't do that anymore. That's impossible. It was funny because I was recently on a Zoom call, but yesterday, the day before, old colleagues from Cheers, writers, and our longtime writer's assistant died about a week ago. His name was Barry Zajac. He was phenomenal.
He had that great voice.
Yes, yeah.
I remember.
Incredible character. Right. Like half the stories we could tell would actually be actionable. But we were remembering, just because I don't think we'd all been together, what it was like to be in a room, the writer's room, and just what the kinds of things we said and the kinds of jokes we made and the kind of freedom we took with everyone else's life and life events and life choices. And the only way to describe it is in current terms, like it was insanely toxic and actionable. And we were on the Zoom call saying, are we allowed to remember these? What about this one? What about that one? And people kept trying to remember, like, one or two of us would kind of be silent for a while. Like, wait, we have one for you too. And we kind of didn't finish the call until everyone had been officially, the memory had come up and been officially skewered. We were all sort of in this suicide pact together. But all that stuff's gone too. I mean, I don't know how you write comedy now in a writer's room. I mean, you must have to sign. I think you have to sign a waiver. I mean, I'm certainly, when I put together a staff for the next show I do, I'm going to have them all sign a waiver.
Wow.
Nothing you cannot sue me.
We've all buckled ourselves into 3-point restraints. I mean, when I told my daughter, I said this from time to time, when you see a video or a picture of people in a 1966 top-down car going on the freeway at 80 miles an hour without seatbelts, smoking a cigarette and eating a McDonald's hamburger with one hand, or some fried, scrabbling through the bag for some of those beef tallow fries. Those are the freest people you'll ever see. Now,
yeah, right.
That said, wear your seatbelt, don't smoke, and it's good we don't.
Right.
But that said, I mean, there's something to be said for the freedom that we had, and yes, it led to toxicity and the rest of it. But today, we've all just we've put the cone of silence around our own heads, and we don't even have the Get Smart luxury of having two people in it. We put it around our set and censored ourselves. Yeah. But Peter, what you talked before about the people who don't know, it was always such. There were always people who didn't know. I mean, being concerned and connected about the immediate history that preceded your life is kind of a rare thing, and not normal. Those of us, however, when we were growing up, who wanted to be interested, and there were a lot of us, and it didn't make you special if you were interested in history, though. It was easier to get the narrative because there were so fewer artifacts. If you wanted to learn about the 20s and the 30s, well, what did you do at Fargo, North Dakota? You went down to the library, you checked out the New Yorker Book of Cartoons, you tried to get the references, you looked at Life magazine, you looked at
right.
I mean, you could get a thumbnail sketch and glean from what was the cultural artifacts that survived what was going on. And I like that. But now you have an embarrassment of riches. There's just so much.
It's
a fire hose.
Yes.
So you ask,
it's very stressful, but there's nothing you can do about it.
Well,
there's absolutely nothing. It's completely we're victims of that stress, and there's zero we can do. Absolutely zero. Nothing. Not a thing.
Well, pal, if you want to do the commercial, go right
Sorry?
ahead. Absolutely so. Yeah, I guess Rob is leading me into a commercial so we can get to our guest, and that you shall.
You're
Rob
welcome.
Oddly enough, there wasn't even a segue. That was just a self-contained.
There is now, and you're welcome for that
too. Would have led to a segue. Yes, indeed. Stress. He mentioned stress. Right? Yeah, life can be stressful. We know that, even under the normal circumstances. I mean, 2020. Hey, what are you going to do? It challenged even the most difficult people to gather themselves and cope. You need stress relief. You need stress relief that goes beyond quick fixes too. Something that gets to the bottom of it, and that is Headspace. Headspace is your daily dose of mindfulness in the form of guided meditations in an easy-to-use app. Headspace is one of the only meditation apps really that's advancing the field of mindfulness and meditation through clinically validated research. So whatever the situation, Headspace can really help you feel better. Overwhelmed? Well, Headspace has a 3-minute SOS meditation for you. Need some help falling asleep? Don't pop a bunch of pills. Headspace, they have wind down sessions that members swear by. And for parents, Headspace has morning meditations you can do with your kids. Headspace approach to mindfulness can reduce stress, improve sleep, boost focus, and increase your overall sense of well-being. And Rob, of course, since he burst in here to talk about it, Rob, you are the meditative guy, right?
I am.
So you know how an app like this can take people who are otherwise disinclined to do this, and because it's easy and it's right there in the palm of their hand, it can help them. Well, how do you feel afterwards?
Well, they have a whole bunch of different options there, and I am so strictly vanilla. I only use like the just the timer and the quiet part, but they have a bunch of other ones that I think are fantastic too. It's hugely valuable, and I think it's one of those things where you think, oh, I don't have time, but you actually end up having more time because you're much more focused afterwards. So. And there's no studies for this. It's not. This is actually.
No, Rob's right.
This is science. I believe the science.
It's
but
backed
this
by
actually
20
is science.
It's backed by.
So anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
You're right there. I was attempting to just sort of piggyback and shoehorn and take over the commercial. He's right when he says science.
Take it
20 to take it back into my own little hands, my own twitching hands, which indicate.
But I believe in it, so I have to interrupt. Go ahead.
I need Headspace quick. 25 published studies on its benefits, 600,000 5-star reviews, and over 60 million downloads. Headspace makes it easy for you to build a life-changing meditation practice with mindfulness that works for you on your schedule, anytime, anywhere. You deserve to feel happier, don't you? Headspace is meditation made simple. Go to headspace.com/ricochet. That's headspace.com/ricochet for a free 1-month trial with access to Headspace's full library of meditations for every situation. It's the best deal offered right now. So you go to headspace.com/ricochet today. And we thank Headspace for sponsoring this, the Ricochet Podcast. Now we welcome back to the podcast our old friend John Yoo, formerly the Ricochet Podcast senior impeachment correspondent, and the current John Yoo is now the Ricochet Podcast election law senior analyst, as well as the Ricochet School of Law McRib senior fellow on fast food policy. I don't know why I submit to saying these things. Around here, we just call him the Epstein Whisperer, perhaps. perhaps because he's on the Law Talk podcast with Richard Epstein.
Oh, I thought it was Jeffrey Epstein. But go ahead.
Ooh,
No. Jeffrey? No, it's not the case. Right now, John, and this is again a pitch. If you're a member of Ricochet, you can join us on Zoom and see that right now John is dressed in the hues of a Miami Vice character from 1985 or 86. If I read that correctly, the sort of the turquoise and the pink there. Stunning as ever. John, welcome to the podcast. So,
stunning as ever.
Is it over? It's over, right?
It's been over.
So we got to look at what Texas did and why Texas did. You said, I believe, that Texas lost, but conservatives won. All right, make the case.
Well, thanks for having me back, guys. And I wish I could respond to all the insults James flew my way in just a mere introduction. But I'd just like to say I'm dressed like Rob Long, class of '86, Yale College. After
87.
87. Oh my
87.
God,
so you just
whip.
back up.
It took him 7 years to graduate.
Yeah, well.
And after a great party with Brett Kavanaugh. So I mean, come on. Yeah, this is what Texas was asking for the most outrageous judicial activism, actually, for two reasons. One is Texas had no right to sue. Why does Texas have any right to bring a case that should be brought by people who live in Pennsylvania or even the candidates? No state has a free-floating right to say, I'm suing that other state for how it treats its own citizens or how it runs its own elections, which it has that power under the Constitution. So that's one reason. The second reason,
John, hey, let me do the layman's pushback on that. Mm-hmm. Texas gets to say,
for which you are eminently qualified.
Yes, the ignorant layman, my middle name. So Texas gets to say, wait a minute, it's not just how you treat your citizens. Because you threw the election, our citizens have to live under an illegitimate president for the next 4 years. Isn't that a ground of action?
No.
It's not reasonable. It sounds plausible.
No, think about it. Individual states do all kinds of things that can harm other states, that have bad effects on other states. We don't expect the courts to sort that out. I suppose, suppose you live in Texas and you don't like the way California has become a sanctuary state.
Right.
You just say, look, you're harming the country. You're letting in all these illegal aliens. We want you to change your laws. We're going to see you in court. The place for that is actually Congress. Think about issue after issue where states have disputes with each other. They don't like the way one state's acting. It hurts the country as a whole. There's a forum for it. That was my second point. There's a remedy. There's a forum. It's just not the courts.
There isn't a remedy for this. The Constitution is explicit in very few things, I think, but certainly procedural things. But there is no interpretation available for who has the ultimate authority for governing the process of electing a president. It's the states themselves. That's actually the text. It's impossible. Really, it is impossible to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, to be intellectually consistent as a person in favor of judicial restraint and originalism and the words of the Constitution, and also believe that Texas has anything other than the most frivolous and ludicrous argument. I mean, am I wrong here?
Okay, John, I'll correct him, and then you can adjudicate between us. That would be
what.
Wait, so Rob's
what part of the Constitution do you have to then reinterpret?
Here's the argument runs.
All right, counselor.
The Constitution. The Constitution is explicit.
This is the only day I'm ever going to be a Supreme Court justice. But go ahead.
At this rate, yeah.
May it please, Justice Yu.
I love this. This is awesome.
Yeah, exactly. May it please, Justice Yu. The Constitution is explicit in saying that the legislatures of the states determine the election law. The Texas argument, the question of standing is separate, but the Texas argument is, or was, or at least one component, there were sort of bullet pointed arguments. One component of the argument was that in the run up to the election, all kinds of changes got made in procedure, effectively in law, although that's the point. It was state secretaries of state, it was courts, and all of these changes in election procedure got made without the imprimatur of the legislatures. So one component of the Texas argument was as I understood it, that the explicit language of the Constitution was violated in those states themselves.
But all of those bureaucrats were appointed, and all of those bureaucrats were appointed and approved by the legislatures.
Yes, but you're not allowed. There's certain things you're not allowed to delegate.
Mr. Robinson, quiet, or I'm going to have to put you in contempt.
In any case,
again,
it is entirely up to the residents and voters in the state to complain if they feel that's wrong. I mean, in a perverse way, I think. You correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Justice.
I love this.
The Roe v. Wade decision has more constitutional grounds. In that case, it has zero. Than the Texas argument, which has negative grounds.
Yeah, but we've already dealt with the question of standing. The question now, may I please, Justice Yu, the question now.
I believe I want to give Justice Yu now.
The question now is the explicit language of the Constitution.
Who's right?
Legislatures may not.
Who's right?
Legislatures may not delegate to bureaucrats the rewriting of state election law.
Of course they can.
All right.
So here's the
Mr. Justice.
Let me issue my ruling. Oh God, the power. Where's my little baby?
Oh man.
You got a gavel?
He's got a gavel. All kidding aside,
I've been waiting.
Just use it on your head.
25 years.
Use it on your head, John.
It actually just makes a noise. Bonk.
Wait, so this is not
you got that from the you got that from the Franklin Mint, right? Famous Gavels of History collection.
This is actually what you do when you get at the very end of the McRib sandwich. You got to crack through the crackling they put on at the end. No. So you both make good points. You guys have done such a great job. I think I'm going to
learned a lot.
C- from anyway, you. Which is great inflation. Actually, I think the way the court handled it is that if Peter has a point or not, the court's never interpreted this clause, right? Whether it's state legislatures or just the state government can change the election laws. But all the court was saying is there's a different place to bring that, and it's not the Supreme Court. Rob's right. There is a different way you raise these claims. Right? First, you raise it within your own state in the federal courts as a voter or as a candidate. But think about it, look at the Constitution. It actually has two other places. So Rob said the Constitution is not clear that often, but here it's clear. Mm-hmm. There's two other places to bring objections to these for these kinds of voting fraud claims. One is you could ask Congress to pass a law, right? The same clause that says as the state legislature says Congress can pass a law to override all these state regulations if it wants. Chose not to. The second one is my favorite 12th Amendment, the never read, rarely examined 12th Amendment, which says, right, all the electoral votes come into Washington. They come on January 6th this year. The vice president opens them in the presence of the House and the Senate. And then this is the great part, the Constitution, the passive tense says, then they are counted. So people have thought at that crucial point, you can raise objections to whether the electoral vote was valid or not. And actually Congress has since after the election of 1876, they passed a law, you may have heard about it, that says if one member of the House and one senator both object to say the electoral vote from Pennsylvania, then they have to vote on whether to accept the electoral votes. This is, I have to say,
that's statutory. That's
in a statute. Mm-hmm. It's all laid out. There's a whole process for resolving these disputes. And
John is the world expert on this because nobody else is interested in it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was trying to explain this to Trump the other day, but he wouldn't listen. No. So, and this is the interesting thing. The House and Senate is separate into separate bodies. They each vote, and they have to both agree to throw out that electoral vote. Otherwise, it's valid. So this is why Texas is full of it.
Wait. Say that again. So you get one senator. So let's say Pennsylvania or Georgia.
Yeah. So this is
one senator and one member of the House. They don't have to be from Georgia.
Just anybody.
Any member of the Senate, any member of the House.
You shouldn't count those votes from Pennsylvania.
And then what happens?
Then the House and Senate vote
whether to accept those votes.
Yeah, and they both, as a body, each body has to agree to throw it out. Otherwise, it's valid. So there's still one last Hail Mary pass for Trump. Rob's right. It's not legal. It's political. It's not in the Constitution.
Right.
What the standard is, actually. The Constitution and the statute that's been passed, the Electoral Count Act, don't lay out any standards about why you would reject a vote or not. So there's only, can I say this? No electoral vote in our history has ever been thrown out under this process. There have been, I think, 3 examples where they've been challenged. On the last one, this is a great one. For those of you like I who are Dick Cheney fans, Dick Cheney in the 2004 election, right? Remember, it came to Ohio.
Right.
And he won. So Dick Cheney is sitting as vice president. He opens up the electoral votes. There is actually a challenge by a member of the House, I believe, but no one in the Senate challenged it. And so he just, as vice president, he basically said, yes, I am, the electoral votes are in, and I'm finding that I myself have been returned as vice president for another 4 years, and George W. Bush has won. So that was the last time there was an electoral vote challenge, but it failed. No electoral vote's been tossed out on this.
So it was challenged in the House by a House Democrat.
Yeah, this is why no one thinks it'll work, because the House would have to vote by majority to throw out any electoral vote this election, and they're not going to.
Mr. Justice,
this is what the lie. Can you just goes to Rob's point. This puts the lie to Texas, because if Texas really thinks that Pennsylvania cheated, then all they need is one member of the Texas delegation in the House and one Texas senator to raise the objection, and then Congress will have to debate it.
Oh, so Ted Cruz, instead of saying, I stand ready to argue before the Supreme Court, Ted Cruz needs to step up and challenge that thing in the well of the Senate, or where,
and he can,
hey, Mr. Justice, I have a complaint.
Against Rob,
and I would like to, no, this is
not the remedy.
Legal complaint.
You have no standing in this
and
court.
the question, Mr. Justice, is what is the remedy? And the complaint runs as follows. And I believe, Mr. Justice, that I speak for millions of Americans when I explain this complaint. The complaint runs as follows. Lots of evidence of fraud and sharp dealings in the election. Whether it was enough to overturn the election, I'm not even going to say that there's evidence that it was, and whether it was even more than the usual, but there's still evidence of some dead people voted in Nevada, and okay. And we were told, we the American people were told over and over again, and indeed I think you implied as much yourself, or a reasonable interpretation of your remarks could have been that they implied as much.
Jesus, you really sound like a lawyer.
The courts would sort all this out. And the courts have come nowhere close to sorting out the fundamental question, which was there fraud, and was it material? The courts have all dismissed the Trump teams. Now, you can argue, as Rob will argue at the drop of a hat, that Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Pollack were crazy people, and their claims were inflated. Sidney Powell, thank you. Not Sidney Powell.
Sidney Pollack is a film fine director.
Sorry.
I don't know why you hate him.
Thank you. It's a good question whether Joe Biden or I are going to lose our minds faster. But so the courts have, as you just described, the Supreme Court said to Texas, you don't have standing. We're not addressing the charges. We're just saying you don't have standing. In Pennsylvania, the court said the remedy is inconceivable. The remedy you're seeking here is, the first thing we do is set aside all the votes of all Pennsylvanians, legitimate or not, and then we try to figure out what to do next. I'm not even going to consider this case because the remedy you're seeking is outrageous. Nowhere has a court gone to the actual complaint, the actual charges, the substance, which is fraud. And that is at a minimum, to a lot of people, it's absolutely infuriating. There are all kinds of Twitter this, Twitter that the courts are dodging their responsibility. I don't know that, I doubt that that's not a necessary interpretation of what's taking place, but at a minimum, it's unsatisfying to a lot of people. That's my complaint, Mr. Justice. What's the remedy?
You should get that Headspace guy to give out more free copies of his program and calm people down. But actually, so this is the other aspect of the Supreme Court opinion, which didn't explain, but which is part of it, which is even though we're not the right forum, the Supreme Court is not the right place to resolve this. Any voter in those states can challenge and make the exact claim you did, Peter, that either the state legislature constitutional right was taken away by the governors or the courts, or that there was actual fraud in the collecting or counting of the votes. Those cases have been made. in the right places, in state court, in federal court, at the trial.
They have. They're just not receiving attention. Or at least
but they've been rejected. Every single. I mean, I think there's only one case out of the dozens and dozens where the Trump campaign won. It was just about how close do the observers get to be to, right, see the ballots being opened and counted. But I would actually say this is an incredible example of the resilience of our court system. The courts have heard these cases all over these states, dozens of them in emergency fashion, deciding within weeks, which is light speed, right, for the courts. And none of them have found any fraud.
So there have been decisions on the facts.
Oh yeah, there have been dozens, all over. All right. You could say, oh, well, why hasn't the Supreme Court heard those? Well, maybe they will eventually. As you say, the mistake also that the campaign has made is that they've said, and what we want is the results thrown out, or we want the election run over again. Maybe you could even do that in a state. It's not going to change the outcome. The Electoral College vote for Biden was so large.
So last question. This is really quick. I mean, I can state it quickly. We don't want this to happen again. We want people to have confidence in elections. How do you, maybe this isn't even the right way to put it, but as best I can tell, nobody doubts that Florida, which after the excruciating recount in 2000 did a total reform of its election process. As best I can tell, Florida has kind of best practice election processes. What's the correct way over the next 4 years? Well, let's just say to ensure that it never happens again, that more states look like Florida and fewer look like Pennsylvania.
I've got no special expertise on this one, but I would say it's interesting. All the affected states that are in contention all have Republican legislatures, right? Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona. You would think one way they could respond to this anger you're talking about amongst the voters is to have a reform of their election laws. I would say, now this is going to appeal to Rob, I would say let's bring in the people who do this for a living in the private sector. You want to have the votes counted correctly, just bring in some people from Vegas who handle money and say, you can create a system of cameras and pit bosses, and you will make sure not a single ballot gets miscounted. You want to have registration and voting properly done, then just get Amazon to do it. Just get anybody who has to verify a customer's credit card is, real. You want to talk about squeezing fraud out of the system. People in the business world do this all the time. I mean, it's
McDonald's and the little gift cards in the McDonald's Monopoly meal.
I mean, McDonald's prevents me from buying more than 5 McRibs at one sitting. How do they do that? How do they know?
That's also your cardiologist, just so you know. Working in concert with your healthcare professional.
It's just spam pressed into a different shape. I mean, everyone loves spam.
Well, the question is whether or not you've fallen under the baleful influence of Donald Trump so far that you put ketchup on your McRib, but that's something we'll have to take for another podcast, perhaps.
Oh.
But Rob's right. I mean, you have to use two-step verification practically to get your order at Taco Bell. Why can't we figure out how to do this better? Hey, John, we got more to say, but as usual, we're running over time because you just have so much to offer, and we're so happy to hear it. So Merry Christmas and all that. And we'll see you with some other pretext ginned up at the start of the year to have you back again, because it's always fun. Show us the gavel again. Show everybody in the audience that gavel.
There's the gavel.
Show us the gavel. So
Court is now out of session for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Justice, we thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
John.
Hey, 2020, 2021, we need our lungs. Lungs are a big part of breathing. And so maybe I should stop smoking, but how to do it? And don't talk to me about that gum. That stuff is like eating modeling clay with a little hint of mint. Hey, listen, I'm here to tell you about something that actually is good tasting. Nicotine gum that's good tasting. If you ever tried them, you know that their whole point is like, you don't need taste. You're trying to get off the stuff, and so this is going to do and suffer. No, Lucy Nicotine it's a company that, first of all, they get it. They get the whole flavor thing. But it's a company founded by Caltech scientists and former smokers who are looking for a better and cleaner nicotine alternative. So finally, you got tobacco alternatives that don't suck, as in inhaling. It was researched and developed for 3 years to be made for people, not patients. Lucy has created a gum with 4 milligrams of nicotine that comes in 3 flavors: wintergreen, cinnamon, and pomegranate. They also have a great cherry ice lozenge. They're convenient, they're discreet, they taste great. So get rid of your cigarettes, unplug your vape, throw out your dip, and get some Lucy nicotine gum or lozenges. It's the real deal, frankly. A subscription to Lucy comes directly to your door each month. And if you've ever known somebody who's taking the gum and they ran out, they had to go to the Walgreens or the CVS at 11 o'clock at night, no, don't worry about that. It comes to your door. It's so simple. You don't have to leave your house because Lucy has delivery down pat. Ricochet podcast listeners, sound good to you? It should. Go to lucy.co. That's lucy.co. And use the promo code Ricochet to get 20% off all products, including gum and lozenges. That's lucy.co. Promo code Ricochet at the checkout. And heck, to say this, warning, this product contains nicotine. Yeah, derived from tobacco. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. There, we hope California's happy. We thank Lucy for sponsoring this, the Ricochet podcast. And now...
the James Lileks Member Post of the Week.
Christmas miracle.
I have to say, it is a Christmas miracle. The past two, this is 2 in a row.
I know.
That's not quite a trend, but it's...
Well, it means that the bit is evolving. It's morphing. It's learning.
What happens when it's always just naturally on time? Then what do we do?
Then it's going to be a challenge to me to come in right after it as tight as possible and for you to shut up.
I don't think that's going to, I don't think either one of those things, well, happen. One of them could happen, but I guarantee you another one of those could not happen.
Post of the week from Clifford A. Brown, a Ricochet member who wrote, "'Tis the season for bad Christmas music." And this piggybacks a bit on what Peter was talking about last week, how much he hates that Beatles song, Simply Having a Wonderful Christmas Time. Clifford A. Brown wrote, "The Christmas season brings with it holiday music, some quite good, some not quite good, and some wonderfully bad. Every wave of popular music with eventual Christmas singles."
I will never forgive you, Rob Long.
I didn't do
stars it. Doing what? Hey, this is not Rob's doing.
No,
I'm sorry. I'm hearing "Wonderful Christmas Time" as a music bed to me speaking here, and then that's
that's no. I know what else can hear it, James. It must be rattling inside your brain.
I think that's so. So anyway, Clifford said that singing stars and others seem drawn to Christmas music like the wise men following the star. Consider a few examples, but do set your beverage down before listening, as some are inadvertently merry and bright. Why is this a post of the week? Well, because it's Christmas coming up, obviously, and because it's something we all love to talk about, not just our favorite songs, but the worst out there. And there's no genre of music that contains so much badness as Christmas. It's just an unfortunate fact. You take rockabilly, and the worst rockabilly song is still a rockabilly song. But the number of people who've tried to take this small collection of songs and meld them to their will is just appalling. And I don't know if it's a generational thing that after you stop listening to pop music, every pop singer's attempt to essay these songs just strikes you as wrong, or whether or not it's empirically true that most Christmas music is bad and banal, and that's okay because, it just prepares us for getting back to the original purer versions that we like. Now, you, Rob, Peter, you both have a version of a song that for you nails it, right? There's no other version. That's it. What would that be?
Well, I mean, for the modern sort of popular music carols, I mean, it's hard to beat for almost any version of "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas." There's a Sinatra "I'll Be Home for Christmas" that's really good. There's also Sinatra "I'll Be Home for Christmas" that's terrible because it's like upbeat and jaunty. It's like there's a Sinatra version of "I'll Be Seeing You" that's fantastic. And there's a Sinatra version of "I'll Be Seeing You" that's upbeat and jaunty where you forget that the song was written about somebody saying goodbye to Paris while the Nazis marched in. So it's like, I would say that those are two of my favorite modern carols, definitely. Although, the weird thing about Christmas, I think Christmas, just to use the Arthur Brooks formulation, as a religious holiday commemorating a religious time, some of those carols are really beautiful. I mean, there's a minor revolt at St. James Church where I go to in Manhattan, which tends to be a little high church about this stuff, where we don't sing Christmas carols before Christmas. We sing them in the 12 days, obviously, because it's Advent. We sing Advent carols, of which there are precious few. Most of it's
Yes.
O Come Emmanuel.
Yes,
You hear that, we sing that a lot. And there's this kind of this like when the parishioners mention it, like, gee, we'd like to sing a Christmas carol, they well, they're not really, they put their foot down there. So I don't know. I think there's just tons of great music. What's amazing to me is how I don't think it was a money grab, just how obvious it was. Every popular musician, every pop singer had to have a Christmas album. It's like you couldn't not, because from a certain point in the end of November, beginning of December to New Year's Eve, that's all people were going to play and wanted to hear. So you really it was expected of you. The number of weird Christmas albums that exist is I think it's kind of glorious.
There are songs, for example, you mentioned the 12 Days of Christmas. Song is just, it's interminable. And it's the 99 bottles of beer in the wall song about Christmas. But I have a version of it by Doris Day that's absolutely brilliant. It's just lovely.
Oh,
and and you listen to it and you realize, oh, that's right, she could sing. And wow, what a clear bell-like tone that she had. And the orchestration, the arrangement is so mid-60s, high, swank, boomer culture. It's really quite delightful. Or it's actually greatest generation culture. And so, like, nobody else can sing that song except Doris Day for me. And the attempts of other singers to wrest from the classics, that sort of identification, you have to salute their bravery in trying. Peter, your favorite performer?
Baby It's Cold Outside, Ella Fitzgerald, and Louis Jordan. I have no idea who Louis Jordan was, what else he sang, what else he did in life. No idea. All I know is that rendition is the rendition of Baby It's Cold Outside. James being James, he probably, you guys may know all about Louis Jordan. All I know is that he was in a duet with Ella Fitzgerald over half a century ago, and nobody's touched it since.
Oh yeah, some of those old ones are fantastic. James, you were the one I think that I remember who also remembered along with me those great Goodyear.
Yes, Goodyear
music, a Christmas Carol album, Goodyear and Firestone. For some reason, I mean, there's no real reason why. I mean, I think Firestone did it because Goodyear did it, or Goodyear did it because Firestone did it. But someone in some, benighted little Formica conference table in 1950 something said, "Hey, promotion. Let's do a Goodyear." They come in for their snow tires. They buy the album or something.
Yep.
And they were great. They were great.
The 65 and 66 are absolute masterpieces and snapshots of that culture. I mean, Andre Kostelanetz, who has some classical chops, did We Three Kings, and it's beautiful and stirring. And then they'll follow it with a Sammy Davis swank finger snapping. It's Christmas time all over the world, which nobody ever recorded after him after that. And then Anna Maria Alberghetti has these two songs that are just they sound like just a single star shining on the snow on a dark night. And everything on the album is beautiful. And everything is so American and so Western culture. But I mean, when you start out with Edie Gourmet, just laughing their way through Sleigh Ride, and end up with Sammy Davis Jr. But in between, you have this journey that just takes you to Eugene Ormandy, to Leonard Bernstein in one of them. So you have the whole high and low culture in this middle package. That is just so instructive of the time. It is beautiful, and I love the fact that the tire stores had competing Christmas album paradigms.
It's a great,
just like Woolworths went up against Kresge for the same thing.
Two Christmas thoughts. I know because we're running late, but one is I worked with actually one Christmas thought in one name. These friends of mine, these guys named the Gregory Brothers. They do a thing called Songify the News, where they take sort of news events and speeches and they turn them into music, basically by using auto-tune technology to make it sound like they're singing. It can be very, very funny. They do the most lo-fi, fantastic reading presentation of A Gift of the Magi. And they've done it on stage for every year that I can recall. And I think you can find it on YouTube. And they read it and they have music to it. And it's so not strangely moving, but it's really moving and really wonderful and funny and nice. And they write the music to it too. And I think it's all of 20 minutes, but it is but it is so great. And they do, a couple. We had them when I used to do a Christmas show with my friends Harry Shearer and Judith Owen. We had them. They performed with us at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. So it's a big theater, big opera house we were in, and these guys came on and they killed. They just killed. With a couple of carols kind of done in a sort of specific style that was super wonderful. So if you're looking for just something different but also wonderful, Gregory Brothers is what you want.
We have a local group here that is a cappella, known for they're called the Blenders. And they had a popular following, and they were known for their Christmas concerts. And they're from Fargo. And one year they called me and asked if I would like to be on their Christmas album as a DJ. I could not absolutely turn it down, and I did. Had to show up and read some copy in the studio, and very professional and the rest of it. But just knowing that I made it on a Christmas album is an accomplishment than knowing that I ever made it, in the letters page of the New York Times or the editorial page of the Washington Post. That's something. That's because my father loved Christmas music, and one of the things that he hated about the end of the season was it went away. But it has to go away. You have to put it up. You have to pack it away so that when you take it out, the memories all come out. I mean, it's like an emotional potpourri that never loses its scent over the years, or its potency. As a matter of fact, seems to increase in its importance as the years go past. And I just save it for the last moment. I really do. Whereas I used to just sort of listen to it all through the season, have the kids and school them in what it means to be in America and Christmas. Now it just it's down to Christmas Eve where I play that album, and it's almost too much.
Well, let me give you. I looked it up just so it's an album you can get by the Gregory Brothers called Sleigh Ride, Fireside, and it has some of the famous ones, but also some carols. So Come All Ye Faithful, and then a fantastic rendition of Go Tell It on the Mountain. It's completely worth it. It's absolutely a Sleigh Ride, Fireside, the Gregory Brothers. It's the classic Christmas album that you have been wanting, and now it's here.
We have one more thing to do, and we're going to do it in just a second here. But first, I got to tell you this, because if I started saying this without "there's more to come," you'd tune off because you'd figure it's the end of the show, but it isn't. But we do want to say, first of all, thank you for spending your pandemic time with us and supporting Ricochet. It's really been, it's helped me an awful lot. I hope it's helped you. And the more you join, the better it's going to be. The podcast was brought to you by Headspace, by Lucy, by ExpressVPN. Support them for supporting us, and they'll help us get it through 2021 as well. You can listen to the best of Ricochet. It's a compilation. It's a clip show, and it's got some guy named Jim Lileks who does the announcing. It's on Radio American Network. Check your local listings. And, of course, give us a Christmas present. It's free and it's cheap. If you go to Apple Podcasts and give us 5 stars, we deserve it, frankly. And, it's free, and it will make us feel very much better. You don't have to wrap it. Just hand it over. Just hand it over now. All right, guys. Predictions for 2021. We used to have our prediction for the big story of next week, and we were always wrong. What are you guys looking at?
It won't be as bad. That's my prediction for 2021.
Mm-hmm.
I like that one. I'll take that one. It'll be worse. No. I think this is going to happen, and this maybe I'm saying it because I think it's a wish. It's Arthur Brooks said it, and I've been struggling with how to put it for months and months and months, and I said it in the most inarticulate ways here, but he put it the right way. Some political movement, some cultural political movement is going to discover the joys of the 93%, and they're gonna, and it'll be mostly people on our side. That's what I think.
That's fair.
And I think that's going to be. It will take a lot of effort from a lot of people who don't want to, ride the horse. But I think that I'm hopeful that that in the crack, there's going to be some people discovering the joys of things that we already know about. How about that? That's a cautious optimism.
That's fair. Stanley Crouch, the great
music critic who died this year, had, curiously enough, sort of this insight into political. Anyway, Stanley Crouch, the quotation is, in a democracy, you never know who the messenger will be. The open-endedness of it all.
Yes, that's great.
Well, we do know who the messenger of the news is going to be, and that will be all the people on television and the people in the newspapers and the like, and they are going to be doing their damnedest to make sure that we know that wonderful times are here. It's okay to love America again. It's okay to be patriotic because the right people have the reins in their hands now. So everything is going to be okay. So you're going to see this efflorescence, I think, of patriotism and hope and spirit and optimism and the rest of it. Now, I don't share their predicates or why they're being so optimistic, but at least it'll be a respite from 4 years of being hit about the head with hammers and telling us that everything is horrible. So I'll take that. Gentlemen, we're not going to be here next week. We're going to see everybody on January 8th, as a matter of fact. And in the meantime, if you're hurting for podcasts, check out other things in the Ricochet Audio Network. Go back and listen to the Ricochet flagships you missed. Just enjoy yourself. Be happy as you ought to be. And we wish you a very happy and healthy Christmas season to everybody. And we'll see you in 2021. Gentlemen.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas,
guys.